Good morning, everybody, or indeed to some of you, I know, good afternoon in the Middle East and Asia. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to welcome you to this, our 73rd annual conference and exhibition. And of course, this is the first time we've done it fully virtually. So apologies for some of you having little access problems this morning. I guess in these events, we swap wardrobe malfunctions for technical malfunctions. But I'm really delighted to be able to welcome you all. We are living in some extraordinary times, and certainly the opportunities that creates in terms of change are really positive. But in the short and the medium term, we have many challenges. But during the course of this conference, we're going to cover a lot of these themes, everything from our response to the pandemic, how we work through the big issues of things like inclusion and diversity, how we upskill and reskill our workforces, and what we have to do to build our profession for the future. Of course, in normal times, we would be all physically together, and I know so many of you will miss that. I indeed miss it. As one of the things I really look forward to every year is meeting and seeing so many of you up in Manchester as we traditionally have. And perhaps next year we'll be able to do that again. But this will be a different experience. We've had many big live events. Our first big live event was the Festival of Work back in June. And I think we learned a lot from that. It was, for many people, I think, a very different experience. For me personally, presenting these things, it's probably the first time I've ever presented sitting down and wearing jeans. And many of you, I think, will be able to access this conference in so many different ways from wherever you are. During the conference, we have more than 30 different sessions with 80 speakers. I would also strongly encourage you to go visit our virtual exhibition where we have 39 exhibitors, all telling about the different things that they're doing to support our community and the world of work. And I also want to particularly thank our key sponsors, Sage, Reward Gateway, and Ceridian. So the only other thing to say in terms of brief introduction is that we will be respecting the 1 minute silence at 11 o'clock. Today is Remembrance Day for all of those lost in wars throughout our time. So we will be respecting that 1 minute silence. So let's move on. In terms of the things that are affecting the world of work today, the reality of the crisis that we're in is, of course, not the only crisis. We've been living through a lot of different changes in recent years. We've talked about the environmental crisis. We've talked about the economic crisis, certainly from 2008. Then we had a strong recovery, but now, because of the pandemic, we are seeing a significant economic crisis as well. So these are indeed times of change. And as so many people have said in the past, that from crises, although there is a lot of danger and a lot of risk, and they're very difficult things to endure, particularly a pandemic at this time, which we've never experienced, they nonetheless create real opportunity. We are also, of course, learning a whole new language. I just saw yesterday that in the Collins English Dictionary, the word of the year apparently is lockdown. And for many of us, including those in the United Kingdom, or certainly England, and slightly different variations across the United Kingdom, in Ireland and in France and other countries, we're still in quite strong lockdowns as we're facing this sort of second wave of the epidemic, and we still have a long way to go. I think the other word that I've heard probably more than any other through these times is the word unprecedented, which certainly speaks to the fact that so much of what we're experiencing is new. But I think, as I said, that there's a lot that we can build from that. And those are some themes that we will talk about throughout the conference. But the reality is that not only, of course, this is a health crisis, it is creating an economic crisis. And we know that overall, the global growth rates have dropped from last year, and these are OECD estimates, from about a 3% positive growth to a minus 5% growth this year across the global economy. And that is a huge, huge drop. It speaks of recession. And of course, that has big impact on people's livelihoods, their jobs, their opportunities. And as we've seen, the recent job statistics everywhere are showing an increasing number of people who are in unemployment. In different countries, we've had different ways of responding. The so-called job retention schemes or furlough schemes, which is also a word we've become very familiar with, is certainly part of the governmental response and trying to do all we can to protect people in their jobs and work. We have seen now in the United Kingdom that we're down to around 2 million plus in furlough, and many people who were in furlough in recent months have perhaps seen their jobs go. But with the recent changes of furlough extension, we are hoping that more jobs will be retained in these coming months. And then who knows? I mean, we've heard very recently news about the vaccine that might provide some real hope coming into the spring and summer. And so who knows? We may be able to get through this period with retaining more jobs. But there is no doubt that a lot of restructuring, a lot of the hard work we still have to do in dealing with these very difficult challenges still lie ahead. The other thing just to mention is about our own surveys and work on this. We've just launched the CIPD Labour Market Outlook for the periods leading up, or the months and weeks leading up to November, which did show that 30% of UK employers are still expecting to make redundancies up to the end of December, which is a significant amount. Now, that may have been affected, of course, by more recent governmental announcements on the extensions to furlough. But they're also looking at redeployments, recruitment freezes, pay freezes, and we know those have been part of the things we've had to do to adapt and respond to these really difficult times. But as I touched on briefly before, the pandemic we're going through is also building on many changes in the world of work. We talked for a long time about digital disruption and all these debates about the future of work. There's a lot of geopolitical change going on as well around us, a lot of different debates about what the new politics will look like. And as I said, also things like climate crisis. But this pandemic fundamentally is about people. And hence, this headline that came out, or this article that came out in The Economist at the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdowns, really, I think, speaks very strongly about the role that HR has played throughout this. And I think we can all take a moment to reflect and be proud of what we have done as a profession to support organizations everywhere in adapting. And there's no doubt in my mind, as I talk to HR leaders and HR practitioners everywhere, that we have never worked harder. We've never been more at the center of the response of organizations to change. But I think, as I said also, that does create opportunity for us in the positioning of the profession going forwards. So there's a lot for us to work on, and a lot of things that we want to share during the course of this conference about how we build back better. So responding and adapting, as I said, this has been a very big part of what we've done. And of course, for so many of us, we have been working from home. Generally speaking, almost half the workforce in a variety of ways has been working from home. But of course, we also have to reflect and remember that there are many, many people who are not able to work from home because of the nature of their jobs. And there's definitely been, I think, a big raising of awareness in all of us about what are these essential jobs that really keep the economy going and keep and support us in everything that we do in our daily lives, all the way from supply chains of food, of people who look after our healthcare and social care, of our agricultural workers, of security workers who keep buildings secure, all of these sorts of roles and jobs that people do, which are so essential and yet haven't always been as visible as perhaps they should be. And now is the time to reflect on those as we think about building ahead. But certainly home working has been a way of us all understanding how we can work in different ways, how we can work more flexibly, and indeed break some of the cycles and paradigms of work which have been with us for so long, about standard hours of working and about presenteeism, where so many people feel that they're being judged at work not by what they produce, but by the hours that they input. We've also learned, I think, a lot through this time about looking after people, about communicating differently. Everywhere I talk to leaders, they're saying we've had to respond differently. We've had to show compassion. We've had to engage and connect with people in very different ways and far more regularly. Not that we can give everybody all of the answers, but that we can show that we're listening, seeking to understand, and working together to navigate through these genuinely unprecedented times. And we've done a lot of research as the CIPD on all of these effects. And we know, for example, that during the summer months, as things began to ease off, and there was some encouragement to go back to workplaces, there was a lot of resistance to that, not least because people were still very worried about their vulnerability to the virus, about the safety of not just their workplaces, but traveling to work. And I think even when we do get to perhaps a place where we've got more vaccination or more immunization in the populations against the coronavirus, we will still be looking at some of these ideas and saying, actually, why don't we have different working schedules? Why do we all have these wasted hours commuting and the stress that's creating for us all. Because these ways of working, not only can we be productive, we give people more choice, and it's also good for their well-being. But as I said, it's so important that we recognize all parts of our workforces, that we are fair in all that we do to implement, perhaps more flexible working practices in the future. And we really work hard to ensure that everybody is included within those ideas. But as I said, it really has been a period of learning, I think, for all of us. And certainly as the CIPD, we have worked very, very hard to support the professional community. And the Coronavirus Hub, which I'm sure so many of you have accessed, has been a huge source of content, of learning, of sharing, and of knowledge. The Coronavirus Hub that we created at its peak, it had more than 10,000 viewers per day, which is a huge volume of people. And the furlough guide that we've created had 1.2 million accesses. So I'm very proud of what we've done as the CIPD to work with you as the community to support the incredibly challenging times when we're all trying to learn. We're trying to respond rapidly to changing guidance and advice from governments everywhere, to know what the right things to do are with our workforces. What are our options? How do we treat people fairly? And all of those sorts of ideas. And indeed, we've also run a lot of webinars, 32 webinars, which have had over 1,000 people registering per webinar in many cases. And we're still running webinars, still creating these roundtables and these opportunities for people to connect. Because again, another thing that is so important in all of this is how do we support each other? And one of the best ways we can do that is to strengthen the connections across our community. So we will continue to do these things. We will continue to provide advice and guidance and content and learning and sharing to all of you as we move forward. But of course, there have been some other issues as well. The May the 25th, which saw the killing in Minneapolis of George Floyd, was a seminal moment. It called out the issues that so many of us have perhaps not understood well enough about race and racism in our communities. And what stood out so strongly for me, and I think for so many of us, is the strength of feeling that that particular moment, May the 25th, was a trigger point. It created a lot of anger and a lot of concern in certainly our Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities, but many other communities as well, and a shared sense of we have to take action. Enough is enough. And of course, it has created a lot of challenge for many, many organizations. How do we respond? What do we do next? How do we show that we are taking action? And I would say, even for us in the CIPD, yes, it did take us a few days to respond and say, what have we got to do differently? How do we support our community in really showing that we will address these issues? We will work towards creating more inclusion and more equity and fairness in all of our workplaces. And there's a lot that we have to do and can do. We have to open up the dialogue in our organizations. We have to listen to each other. We have to create safe environments where not only can people be called out in terms of what they say and where that could be easily misinterpreted and misunderstood, but also be prepared to be called out themselves. And that says we've got to trust in each other. We've got to have integrity in how we approach these things and intent. But it is so important that we open up the dialogue, that we share and that we educate each other on what the issues are. And particularly that we learn from our Black and Asian and ethnic minority communities about their lived experience. And that is something that we can all do. And it is so vital to moving forwards into societies and communities within our workplaces that is good for everybody. And at the end of the day, these, of course, are societally important issues, but they are really, really important issues for business as well. I've long talked about the need for inclusion in workplaces because good and inclusive and fair and equitable workplaces are places where we can attract all the talent and skills that we need, that we create diversity in our organizations, a diversity of thinking, a diversity of experience. We know that's what we need, not only to break groupthink, but to innovate. We also know that we need to create inclusive and diverse workplaces that reflect our customers and our communities that we are all part of. And oh my goodness, isn't this an opportunity for business to step up and show that we are part of society and that we can affect positive change in what we do in business? So there's so much from all of this that we can learn, but we must start with open and honest conversations, creating these cultures and communities of trust where we can share our experiences with each other and understand what actions we really need to take to make a difference, to make our places more fair and more open. And of course, race is one of the more challenging issues for us to deal with, and we must address it. But in doing that, we also will address the many, many other issues of diversity and inclusion across all of our workplaces. And I would also say that we've got to be more transparent. We've got to understand what is going on in our organizations. What are the demographics? Are we making progress? And indeed, things like ethnic pay gap reporting, which we support, are other ways in which we can all understand and be transparent and show all our stakeholders that we are trying to make progress. And that includes what we're doing at the CIPD. I've committed to what we did at the CIPD is that we will address these issues for ourselves. I think we have made some progress in many ways in our organization, as I know many of you have as well, in terms of seeing more diversity. But we know we have more to do. We know we have more to do in terms of creating these cultures of trust and engagement and inclusion for all. So very, very important things. And again, in terms of what we've done as the CIPD, we have responded, and I think we've built a lot of great content and support to everybody. Because as I said, these are not always easy things for us to do. So many businesses, so many leaders, and indeed HR people have said, so what do I do next? How do I engage in these conversations with my organization? So again, do go visit our Race at Work and Racism Hub. That has also had a huge response. Since we launched it in June, we've had 25,000 views on it with peak daily figures of 1,500 people. How to create anti-racist strategies and that sort of content has been viewed over 12,000 times. So we know that we are making an impact, I hope, as the CIPD also, in supporting these agendas for our whole community and helping us all to address these issues in our workplaces. But I also want to go further, and I want to announce something that we want to build on. We've been doing a lot of work over recent years on helping to create more inclusion and more opportunity for all. I'm very proud of the volunteering programs that we've created through our communities. Programs like Steps Ahead Mentoring, where we've engaged many of you, indeed 3,000 plus volunteers across our community, have been involved with us, helping to support people back into work or into work, working through job centers, working with people from more disadvantaged backgrounds to help them position themselves as best they can for work opportunities. And that is something that we can do as a professional community like no other. And particularly now when we're seeing the economic effects of the downturn and growing concerns about unemployment, and how might I move people between sectors where we may see job opportunities in some sectors for growth, while others might be in decline. And how do we make sure that we are really supporting people in positioning themselves in those ways? So Steps Ahead Mentoring, the work that we've been doing with groups like the Careers and Enterprise Company to help schools and young people understand more about the world of work, to bring workplaces closer to young people, to give them work experience, to connect businesses to and employers to the educational system. And other things that relate to that, which we've been doing, talking about what are the core skills and essential skills that we all need, and having a consistent and common language in how we talk about these things, not only for young people coming into work, and particularly for those where we start to move beyond a rhetoric that it's all about qualifications or deep sectoral experience, to say, actually, what we really need are these fundamental and core skills, which I can develop in lots of different ways. And that those are the things we need. So attitude and aptitude and critical thinking and problem solving and ability to communicate and work in teams, those are the core skills that we all need. And we've been promoting those through some of our social campaign work as well. And finally, also the work that we've been doing around providing more financial support to people coming into the profession, particularly those from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So what I'm announcing is that we're going to pull together a lot of those activities into a charitable trust working within the CIPD, where we will channel some of our funds more directly to help grow those programs, grow those volunteering programs through our community to help more people into work and through work and to progress, helping people in our profession to progress, and our mentoring schemes from senior people through to people coming up and progressing through the profession has got a particular goal to help people more from our Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities up into senior levels. So the charitable trust will be to capture a lot of that and push it harder and to put more financial resource and commitment behind us and to properly brand it as something that we can all engage with. So do look out for more information on that, but I'm really looking forward to formally launching that, hopefully in the new year, and building on, as I said, a lot of the great work that we've been doing. So the other issues that I think are really important, which we've all talked about, and which are so vital, are mental health and well-being. Now, again, I and we at the CIPD have been passionate advocates of the idea of well-being, and I've often reflected, and many of you will have heard me say this, that our own history, which goes back just over 100 years, started with the Welfare Workers Association. And it started with people who were looking after the welfare of workers in organizations like Lever Brothers, which is now Unilever, and Rowntree's and Cadbury's, businesses like that, which incidentally still champion these ideas very much at the heart of their values as organizations. So again, well-being is not a new theme, but it is so important in today's world. And we've been steadily progressing, I think, the agendas on well-being. We've been pushing much harder on the ideas of mental health and support, our duties of care as employers to all of our people. But the pandemic has accelerated this. It has acted in many ways as a catalyst to remind us just how important it is, because these times are very stressful. As I've said already, it's not evenly distributed how people can work. And while some of us may find working from home is better for our mental health, for many people it is not. It's more constraining. We're losing that social connection, which is such a vital part of work. So mental health and well-being is a really, really big agenda for all of us. And a lot of our CIPD research, we've done 20 years of research on well-being in the workplace, working with Simply Health. And it has consistently shown that things like stress at work are one of the biggest drivers of absenteeism from work. And we know, to echo my point I made before, that business can really step up on this agenda. We can show that business and work should be good for us, and how we look after our people is a central agenda for us all. And that we see, therefore, well-being as a critical impact of good and responsible business. And by doing that, if we're looking after our people, which is again going back to the history of the welfare workers and why they did what they did, we know when we look after our people, they can be more productive, they can be more effective, they will stay longer with us, they will do the things that we know we want to help them to do to support our businesses, and they'll look after our customers better. So this, I think, again, is one of those agendas we've had for a while, but this pandemic is accelerating and acting as a real catalyst for change. And a lot of the research and support that we've done on the ideas of not just health and well-being at work, but compassion, the idea of care, the idea of how we train our managers to look after their teams effectively and to show compassion. And all the research that we've seen in recent years on leadership talks more and more about the idea of the compassion and benevolence of leadership as being a critical aspect of engagement in our workplaces and supporting well-being. So again, we've done a lot of research, and we will continue to do this to provide the evidence base that supports not only the importance of the outcomes of well-being, but what are the interventions that we need to provide that support things like mental health in the workplace. And I'm very proud of our associations in these areas as well, working with groups like Mind and Mental Health at Work. And there's a lot of great content, not only on our websites, but places like Mental Health at Work. And all the work that others like BITC do and ACAS and many, many other organizations that are engaged with this. So this is a big collaborative and shared effort. But I really believe fundamentally this is one of our most important goals as a profession for the future. But let's also recognize what we need to do to support each other in our community. I've recognized, as I said at the beginning, that this has been the most challenging time for our profession that we've ever seen. HR professionals everywhere saying they have never worked harder. So we also recognize that, as I said before, that our ability to work as a community, to connect and support each other is part of what will help with our own well-being and our own resilience as a profession. Because we know we are far from the end of this. We still have a lot of hard work to do before we really emerge from this pandemic. And indeed, there are so many things that we are working on for the future. But things like our well-being helplines, things like, and some of which, of course, are confidential. And so where you really do need confidential help and access to that kind of support. And all these different ideas and learnings that we can take from each other as to how we support our own well-being so that we can support others. and our health assured websites, which are providing a lot of support of that kind as well. And the other thing that we've done, I think, which is very helpful to all of this, is to champion and highlight what we do as a profession. Now, I've said many, many times, I'm really proud of what we do as a profession, and I've never been prouder of what we do as a profession during these times. So we established this HR Together campaign, which was to allow us all to tell the stories of the things that we've been doing, what we've been doing to support our organizations, what we are proud of, because those also help us to give us confidence and strength in these tougher times, and to help us build for the future, to help us build a profession which is confident, which is connected, and which is capable of supporting our organizations, not just through this pandemic, but into these changing times of the future, and learning from what we've done in these recent times and months. So that does bring us to this idea of what so many people are talking about as building back better. And whilst it has been very tough, and there's no doubt that in a very human crisis of this kind that the pandemic is, that this has taken an immense toll on many, many people in many, many ways. But we also need to look ahead, and we have learned so much through this crisis. We are seeing that people are central to the business agenda. We're hearing business leaders use that kind of language. We're talking so much more about our connections and our support to people, about their well-being. We're engaging with each other in very different ways. We're looking at each other in our own living rooms and circumstances. We're learning more about each other. And yes, of course, it's difficult in remote circumstances in which so many of us are working. But we will build back better. We will create these more hybrid ways of working, which is a balance of both physical workplace and virtual workplaces. We will create agile ways of working, which are not just about flexible working, but working practices. We will reinvent our offices and office spaces to be more places of connection and collaboration, and not just places where we have to be there from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 just to prove that we're working. And we will create cultures that are truly inclusive, that give opportunities to everybody. Because at the end of the day, I think building back better is about recognizing the idea that business should and work should be good for us. The business has a profound role in creating great societies and inclusion everywhere, an opportunity for all. And that, I think, is ultimately the agenda of responsible business, and businesses that reflect all of the stakeholders to which we serve, our communities, our societies, our customers, our suppliers, the environment, and not least, our employees and the people that work for us as organizations. So this is an incredible time for our profession. We have a lot to do. We have a lot to support each other in doing that. We are committed as the CIPD to help this journey, because the coming months will be hard. Not just the well-being issues, which are so fundamental, but how we restructure and adapt our businesses, what we may have to do still around sometimes having to let people go, but how we also create opportunity for inclusion, and that we're building the cultures of our organizations for the future. So you're going to hear a lot about this during the course of the conference. I'm delighted that next up is Renée Edo-Lodge with June Sarapong. So Renée, I'm sure many of you will know, a journalist and broadcaster, but also now a best-selling and award-winning author. And working with June Sarapong, who's a well-known broadcaster, they will be talking about some of the very challenging questions about race and racism in workplaces and in society, and what we do next. So I'm delighted to hand over to them. I look forward to engaging with you during the course of the conference. I hope you all are able to connect as well as learn. And I look forward to working with you all for the future, for a better future, and to seeing you all, I hope, again in the not too distant future. So thank you for listening. Enjoy the conference. Will there be a very short break whilst we hand on to June and Renée. Thank you.